Welcome to the podcast. This week we've got Poole from Bankside Tackle. Ian, welcome.
Yeah, cheers mate, thanks.
Right, so we've had a load of questions on Instagram, and the overwhelming question is, where have you been? Because we haven't seen much of you for a while.
No, I'm still fishing. Just don't tend to sort of publicise as many of my fish as I used to.
Yeah.
And that sort of coincided with sort of, I guess, obviously when I was in sort of doing a lot of the magazines, but I think one of the things is that most of the magazines I used to write for, apart from Carp World, they're all gone.
Yeah.
So I sort of started slowing down, probably magazine-wise, I sort of slowed down around about 2014, 2015.
Right.
That coincided with a few things really, as in, sort of, I've been with Rich Earth as my bait sponsor since sort of 2001, and sort of Bob out the blue really, Bob rang up and said, oh look, we're slowing down Rich Earth. We're going to sort of basically shut down the business next year, I'm retiring. And it was all sort of added up really, and I was starting to come into the shop at Bankside Tackle. I was starting to help John out quite a bit then, and it sort of, I got to come in here sort of 2-3 days a week, and then all of a sudden it was 3 or 4, and then I sort of slowed down fishing time. I think I probably needed a break, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd fished full pout from about 1998 to about 2014.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't call myself sort of a full timer, but probably, you know, minimum 80 nights a year.
Yeah.
And mainly sort of from April to October I'd be out 2-3 nights a week, and I'd done that for sort of probably sort of 17-18 years.
Right.
So I think it was time to sort of slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I didn't, to be honest, for a couple of years. I think I didn't really do any nights.
Right.
And sort of what got me back into it really was probably 3 years ago I had the chance to fish Rich Wilbur's Spitfire Poole.
Right.
Which, you know, you're not going to give that up,
Yeah.
are you? So I had the chance
Yeah.
to get on there, and I went over there and caught one, and sort of got back into it really.
Yeah.
I managed to, as well, I sort of was lucky to get on one of the Carp Society lakes, I think, which everybody wants to get on now, the Farias down on the water park.
Yeah.
I was really lucky to get a ticket on there quite quickly. No sort of nothing sort of untoward went on. I was just lucky. I put my name down the year when there was a lot going on with the Carp stuff, so I think a few members sort of was a bit wary of sort of paying £700 to sort of like, and maybe lose their money and lose everything. So I think quite a lot of people dropped out of Farias that year, and I sort of benefited from it really.
Right.
And sort of got on within a few months of getting my name down.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And that's where I've spent most of my time since then. So a week a year on Spitfire Poole.
Right.
And basically most of the time I spend is floater fishing in the summer on Farias, and that's basically that's about it really.
Yeah. Lovely. And there's some fish to go out in there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, Farias, I mean, amazing stock of fish now.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to one of the regulars on the lake a few days ago, and it's frightening how many 40-pounders he thinks are in there at the moment. You know, it's probably the best big commons water in the country, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe along with Frimley.
Yeah.
There's a lot in Frimley as well, isn't there? So, but Frimley and Farias, I guess they're probably the two waters that would be classed as if you want a £40 common, then they would be the two waters to go for, I guess.
Yeah. So you say you just sort of mainly floater fish. Is that just days only, or will you still do nights on there? Or?
I haven't done any nights. I've been a member just coming up to the end of my 3rd year now,
right.
And I haven't done any nights, to be honest. I just do days when the conditions are right. To be honest, the first autumn I did quite a lot in the autumn, just doing day sessions. I managed to get a swim going,
right,
until sort of like everybody knew that I was catching out there, and then I couldn't get back in there, which is that's not sort of against anybody who went in there, but that's just what happens on any water. You can't expect a busy water. You can't expect to keep swimmers to yourself.
Yeah.
But I was lucky. I managed to get quite a few fish out there before sort of everyone realised that the fish were there, and they weren't moving.
Yeah.
But most of the time I tend to sort of fish it from sort of May till about September.
Right.
And I'll just go up, and some days I'll just take the floater kit only. I won't even take any bottom gear.
Yeah.
Other days, depending on the weather, I'll take the bottom rods, and sometimes if I walk around it sort of early and sort of there's an opportunity presents itself, I sort of sometimes I'll try and mug one with a PVA bag or something like that.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'll just sit there, wait for the afternoon, and just move on to the fish when they're on the top, and they absolutely love the sun on their backs in there.
Yeah.
They sort of all pop up, like corks really once the sun comes out, and it's always been a great floater water, to be honest. I mean, I can remember fishing it sort of 20 years ago when it was called Carp Lake Daiwa.
Yeah, I remember.
That when I was fishing Horseshoe at the time.
Yeah.
And you could go up to Farias then, and for an afternoon you probably have 5 or 6 fish without sort of breaking sweat, to be honest.
Yeah.
But if you had a 20, then that would be a good fish, you know.
Yeah.
Not like it is now. To be honest, these days, if you have a 20, you're unlucky.
Yeah.
That, I mean, it is the average size of the fish in there is just phenomenal.
Yeah, incredible. And did they come from like a farmer's pond or something like that?
Yeah, I think they came from a few waters, to be honest. I mean, there was a little, there was a farm pond in Oxfordshire somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
That I think there was hundreds and hundreds of these commons, and I think the Carp Society sort of went up there and they I think they all caught more one by one, to be honest, just on the float rods. Yeah. And I think they paid a silly amount of money for them. It was just like a few £100.
Yeah.
And they were all anything from about £1 to about sort of £6 or £7, I think.
Right.
And I think it was something like about 550, something like that.
Right.
I may have the figures wrong, but there was a lot of fish.
Yeah.
And they were chucked in there. And then also, the Carp Society at the time had done a deal with a Swindon club that owned a water called Leyden Lagoon.
Yeah.
They had a load of carp that were getting too big that was smashing up all the match anglers.
That's right, I remember.
And they did a deal where the Carp Society swapped a load of tench for some carp at a Leyden Lagoon, and there was a handful of real nice zip linears, which some of them are still in the lake now.
Yeah.
And then a handful of these commons, longer commons, which again some of those have gone close to £40, if not £40. And then also some fish, a batch of fish came out of water called the Isle in Shrewsbury.
Right.
There were some little commons and fully scaled mirrors. They were generally small, to be honest, quite stunted fish, and most of those have never really done a lot, to be honest. They haven't really sort of grown that well in there.
Yeah,
but some of them are still in there. Very tricky to catch because they've got such small mouths.
Right.
You do see them get caught now and again, but
Yeah.
but they're still in there. And also some fish came out one of Tim Paisley's waters at the mangrove stock pond.
Oh, right, yeah.
There was a handful of good sized mirrors came out of there. He just helped the stock along. They were some spare fish.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some of those still in there. I think the best mirror goes just over £40 now. Obviously the mirrors are outnumbered by the commons.
Yeah.
It's difficult to know how many mirrors are in there, to be honest. I reckon it must be. A lot of people think there's only a handful, but I think there's probably a few more mirrors than people realise. It's the fact that a lot of them just don't get caught.
Yeah.
So I was up there last Wednesday and I was in this bay and I was watching these fish going in and out of the snags. They're obviously all ready to spawn, and all I was seeing was sort of small males, and every so often I was seeing fish jump out that little mirrors and commons and stuff that just don't seem to get caught. I mean, it's unusual for anybody to catch a fish under £20 in Farias.
Yeah.
In fact, it's unusual for anybody to catch anything under 25.
Yeah. You think as well, because I mean, that's not a big deep water, is it? It does well to maintain such a number of big fish.
Yeah,
I mean, it has to be quite rich.
Yeah, it must be a rich water. There's a lot of natural food, a lot of weed, and you've got everything in there. You've got areas. Most of it's shallow, to be honest. Some of it's very shallow, sort of. Even when the water's at its best, it's still only a couple of foot deep.
Yeah.
There are a couple of areas that go down to about 9 or 10 foot, but. Yeah, it's a phenomenal stock. But again, I was seeing fish last week. I was seeing them jump on, thinking, all these small fish I'm seeing, yet they just don't seem to see the bank.
Yeah.
Really weird. I think there's quite a few. Even some of the big fish. I mean, they rarely come out, to be honest. It's obviously difficult to ID all those commons.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them look the same, but there's certain fish in Farias, including the big one actually, which went over £50 a couple of years ago. I mean, they rarely get caught. I mean, that fish hasn't been out for a couple of years now. It's in there because it's been seen this year, and it looks massive, to be honest.
Right.
It's probably at the moment there's probably 250s in there.
Yeah. Is one of those the one that old Ed Wells caught years ago? Do you remember when it at like 36, when everything else was around 20?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Because it was just like a freak compared to all the others.
Yeah. I think some of the fish that went, the first fish that went £40, I think some of those are gone now. But I mean, the £50, the known 50 that's in there, the one that we've seen at 50, that's a real good proportion fish.
Yeah.
It is, as good a common as you could wish to see.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, since it came out at 50, it has been caught then, but it's only ever come out after they've spawned, so it's been like 45, 46, and wait, so it's not been out at its peak again.
Yeah.
And again, I know one of the guys that I could, sort of, when he tells you, you believe what he says because he's been around for a long time. And he's seen it this spring, and he said it, and that's the only reason he's still fishing it, because he's caught most of the others.
Right.
And he said it looks massive, but it just doesn't get caught. And the likelihood is it will get caught, but it'll be probably the middle of July, middle of August.
Yeah.
And it'll be probably £7-8 down on what it should be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting water.
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Especially the floater fishing is brilliant on there, because even though they've had floater fishing pressure for 20 years, they still. They're always up for a floater on most summer days.
Yeah.
You can't always catch them, but you can always get them feeding.
Yeah.
occasionally you get one of the big ones feeding, and you know, as you probably know with the Farias fish, they got great big shoulders on them and that, and you get those feeding on the top, and yeah, it's sort of an impressive sight.
Yeah, like logs floating around.
Exactly, yeah, and you persevere, and then, but very few people actually float fish it. I'm amazed.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good. So most summer days, unusual if you can't get on the fish, because a lot of the anglers are quite happy to you know, do their thing on the longer sessions and stuff, and so the floater fishing gets a bit neglected. It can be a bit of a nightmare, to be fair. The old seagulls down there, as you know, the seagull situation is bad, and you've got to sort of take a few steps to sort of limit that. You know, you can't floater fish it unless you put like a line out, you know, a scare line, which I tend to put out there.
Right.
Just a rod with sort of 4-ounce lead with a sort of yellow spod braid, and just whack it as far as I can. Yeah. You know, depending on who's opposite me and stuff like that, and then just stick it in the air, and the gulls absolutely hate that braid running through the air. So and that's the only way you can floater fish it, really.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't do that, you can't floater fish properly.
Yeah. That's a really good tip. I mean, you're known for sort of fishing the circuit waters, the busier waters. What sort of tips can you give people? Are there certain things that you'll always do? Because obviously, you know, it's Christchurch, Horseshoe, Farias now. Yeah,
one thing I've always done, I always tend to fish for a fish at a time. I'll never go in. I know it seems like, you know, I've been fishing for a long time now, so I've seen sort of like you know, almost the fads, you know, where you know, one time there was like a pellet phase, and then like a particle phase, and we seem to be in a boilie phase now where there seems to be a lot of people like to put a lot of bait out, and that's all well and good, you know. But what I tend to do is, even waters where I know that can work. I mean, even when I fish Wellington Country Park, it's probably one of the ultimate circuit waters now, isn't it? I mean, the tactics at the time, you know, big beds of boilies, you can't catch them on particle, etc., etc. Well, I've probably caught 90% of my fish on there, just on probably sort of fishing 2 rods over, say, probably 8 to 10 spods of hemp and boilie. Right. Really as tight as I could possibly get it. I mean, that's sort of like an old school Horseshoe, Alstoe, Pit 1 style lake, Alstoe, Pit 1 style sort of tactic, really. And I thought, I'll try it on Wellington, and it really worked all the time I was on there, to be honest. Yeah, other people were going on there and putting out large amount of boilers they were catching, but it certainly, I've heard a few people say, Wellington, it's just a boilie only water, you know, you're one trick pony water. But you know, I caught them lots of different ways on there, really. Especially even just chucking solid bags at them as well. I sort of kept that one quiet, because a lot of people tried solid bags on there and they were just catching roach in that. Right. But I did quite well just fishing solid bags, and it was a funny tactic, because there was lots of good roach in there and lots of good bream at the time. Right. And the first time I tried it with the normal bait with the pellets and stuff, I just got breamed and roached out, but sort of a few different ingredients and that did quite well on that, especially in the infamous snag swim that was, you know, where Underwater 5 and 6 were filmed. Right. That was a good swim for that. Right. But I tend to just fish for even on Wellington that had a huge headed of big fish then. Just a 10 to 12 spods. Yeah. And you know, it was weird. I think, you know, with the pull-in pair of hemp, I can remember some nights on there having like 5-6 takes, and I wouldn't bait up. I can remember the first time I tried it, I had a bite, and I thought, right, there's a lot of fish out there, I'll bait up. Yeah. And I had a fish, re-spotted, absolutely killed it. Right. Fish just pushed straight away. I actually watched them rolling away. They absolutely hated it. Yeah. So what I tended to do, I think the hemp would drag them back. So the next night I tried it, had a bite, got the rod back out, and I kept catching. And some nights you could have 4 or 5 fish over 10 spods of hemp and boilie. Which, considering how many fish were in there, and you know, like a couple of 30-pounders can wipe out a kilo of bait in next to no time. Yeah. I was amazed how they keep coming back for it, and I'm sure that was the hemp more than anything. Just gets into the silt and everything, and they just keep coming back, and you could just keep catching them. Yeah. So fish for a bite at a time, I think, even on sort of the waters where people are putting in a lot of bait. There's always a time and a place for putting in, and some waters do, you know, respond to lots and lots of bait, but just fish for one fish at a time and take it from there. And you're not tied to that spot.
Exactly,
you're
tied to that spot.
Yeah, you put in a lot of bait and fish start showing over there. Well, you know, I've put it all in there. You know, I'll give it one night. And whereas, you know, at least if you haven't put it in, you can sort of, you know, you can see fish and move on. But sometimes though, you know, I think a lot. You know, I don't tend to chase fish too much as well. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll give it. You know, if I've seen fish in an area, I'll give it a fair time before I move. If they stop showing in my swim and they start showing on the other side, I won't necessarily sort of be running round there. And that worked on Wellington actually a few times, where I set up on fish, and maybe caught one, and then they moved off, and I've seen them move off. But what I tend to do, even when I do that, I'll always give it another night.
Right.
And that's caught me some of the hardest fish to catch in Wellington, including the old turtle, which was one of the hardest fish to catch.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd been in a swim for a couple of days. I think I caught one, but on the last afternoon, I watched all the fish sort of like rolling towards the other end of the lake, and to be honest, my end looked really bad. It looked, although I've had it now, but I've got till the morning, and I could have moved. Like, there was room to move down there, but I decided not to, and I sort of stuck it out just in case. And yeah, the next morning, I caught that turtle, which back then, it used to come out once or twice a year. And the same with another fish in there called lumpy as well. Again, I set up on an absolute shed full of fish in an area. Anybody who's fished Wellington will know an area called Bramble Bay, which is a small shallow bay, which is always generally full of weed. And when I got down there, it was absolutely stacked. I thought, I'm in here, I'm going to have an absolute shed full. Well, I got the rods out, and then just on dark, I literally watched them all one at a time. They were going out the channel into the main water. And I thought, I've messed up here. I've cast too much and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And anyway, I thought, I'm not moving now. And anyway, next morning, though I never had a bleep, never heard a fish all night. I thought, they've all gone. Next morning, rod's gone off, and it was lumpy. I don't know, just under £40. Again, one of the real tricky old ones to catch. Yeah. I don't know if you ever watched Underwater 5 and 6, you'll remember lumpy as the fish that went and sat over Danny's rig. Right. It's just literally come in the snags, and it sat over his lead under its belly, and it just sat there munching, and it kept doing that every single time. So a lot of people will know which fish lumpy is when I mentioned what it did on the old Underwater 5 and 6. Yeah, it's funny that the bigger ones, how they get away with it. That's how, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. I think it all depends. Sometimes I think it can depend how you fish as well. I mean, when I used to fish Wellington, I could not. There was a fish in there, one of the early big ones. It held the lake record. It was called called split tail. Right. It's quite a recognisable fish. Everybody who's seen the Wellington sort of stuff will know what fish it is. Real deep fish it was, and I just couldn't stop catching it. Whatever I did, I mean, it seemed to just be that tactic of like spodding. I reckon it was maybe because it hadn't seen it, but spodding the hemp and boilie. Yeah, it seemed to be. I think I caught it like 3 sessions in a row. I was putting back a £40 mirror and not even getting it, landed it and thinking, oh no, here you are again. We're looking at holding it in the net for 5 minutes, putting back a £40 without even getting it on the bank and that. And I'm thinking, you sort of put it back and you think, I've just put back a £40 there and I've not even weighed it or photographed it, but I'd already caught it like a couple of times. Yeah. But it just kept coming. Literally, one spring, like 3 sessions in a row, I fished 2 nights for 3 weeks in a row, and I caught it the first night every trip from the same spot on the same tactics. So it's bizarre, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Yeah. So were you on there sort of right back at the beginning with Steve and everyone? I wouldn't say I was on there. I sort of started fishing in June 2004. Right. I mean, to be honest, to be fair, Steve got me my ticket. Steve Renier got me my ticket. I mean, I saw, sort of in the early days of Richworth, I saw Steve, catching these big 30-pounders, from a Reading Stillwater, and I thought, and I sort of asked Bob Baker. I said, the guy who's on the Richworth, I said, Steve Renyard. I said, do you know where he's catching them fish from? And he said, he's coming down to the ship. This was just a week before the one of the winter conferences, I think in 2003. He said, why don't you ask him? He's down on the show. He's coming on the stand on the Saturday. So I met Steve, very friendly guy and everything. He said, yeah, it's Wellington Country Park. He said, we've been fishing it for a few years now. He said it's an amazing place. Probably, 25, 30 different 30s in there. Now, these days that doesn't sound a lot of 30s, but when you're talking 2002, 2003, that was a hell of a stock. There wasn't many places that even had that many 30-pounders, and they were big 30s, like 35s, 36s. And anyway, he sort of said, do you want me to see if I could get you a ticket? And to be honest, he said it's a bit sort of, there's only 30 members and not many people drop out because, I think everybody knew what they were onto a good thing. Yeah. But I think at that stage, so did the park. And the only reason I actually got a ticket was because that year, I think somebody from there had been up to Linear to have a look how they run things. And they decided that they thought, we've got something good here. I think they were getting loads of inquiries. People were finding out about it. They were getting loads of inquiries to the office. I want to fish your Syndicate Lake. What is it? And they were getting so many inquiries that, they thought, what have we got here? We could make some money out of this. So they that was the first year that they increased the membership. They put another 5 members onto 35, and that was how I got my ticket. Right. But back then I think it was about £500, whereas now, was it 2,000 something?
Yeah, something like that.
So I stayed on. I stayed on. That was 2004, and I stayed on for another 3 years. I dropped off when they put it up to £1,000.
Right.
It was a fantastic water, and in those early days, I mean, many a night I'd have it to myself. You go down the midweek and you'd be the only one on there.
Well.
Or there might be 2 of you or 3 of you.
Yeah.
These days it's almost full all of the time. So it was an amazing place to fish. And the fish, they weren't quite as massive as they are now. And I sort of dropped, the time I dropped off coincided with the time when the 40 count just went absolutely sky high. Right. I sort of dropped off just as they were all getting to £40.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a fantastic. I wouldn't change it, to be honest. I think if you're given the choice now to go back on there now and fish it as it is and fish it when I fished it, I think I would have picked when I was on there, just simply because it was so quiet,
Yeah.
And I didn't know the fish, and now everybody knows the turtle, and even though the turtle's gone, but they know all the fish now. They know all the welly fish, what they look like. Well, back then I didn't know. I'd seen pictures of the turtle, and there was one called the original 40-pounder, which was called Big Head.
Right.
I'd seen pictures of those, but everything else was completely new to me. So I was catching fish. I had no idea what they were. Obviously a lot of them went on to become sort of Wellington legends over the years. But then there was a big unknown factor for me.
Yeah.
I think the first session I did 330s and stuff like that. Which back then, these days it seems to be commonplace. But back then in 2004, 330s in a 2-night session, that was it was a hell of a place.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think we need more waters? Obviously, we're talking about how busy everywhere is now. Do you think? I think one of the problems is predation, isn't it? I think we're squeezing. All the anglers are squeezing onto the lakes that are otter fenced. Because I think it's not going to be long. I reckon within sort of 10 years, if whatever's most of the stock in this country is going to be in lakes that are protected, and I think the anglers are gravitating to that. I mean, I certainly think twice now about any water that hasn't got a fence around it. You almost could be throwing money away. You join a lake, the otters turn up, and they can do some serious damage in a quick time. Yeah, and especially some lake owners tend to sort of be in denial mode, and I've seen it even local waters to here, trying to make up every excuse under the sun, and then it finally clicks that they've got an otter problem, but it's sometimes it can be too late to do anything about it. Yeah.
So I think that is the problem, is that everybody's gravitating onto the waters that are fenced, and you can blame them, to be honest, because there's so much there's otters everywhere now, aren't there? I think every county of the UK they're back, and so that it's a bit of a for the waters that aren't fenced and aren't able to be fenced. It's long term. I think it's a bit of a death sentence, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose people like Embryo are doing the right thing, aren't they? But
definitely.
Need more of them, don't we?
Yeah. They've saved quite a few waters now. Oxford Way. In fact, I put my name down for that Stanton. I've got my name down on there.
Yeah.
Wouldn't mind giving that a go.
Yeah.
It's got some nice fish in it. It was one for the future, so I put my name down there sort of last year. I don't know how long it'll take, probably a couple of 3 years to get on or something.
Yeah.
But it's always, it's all nicely protected. And there's some cracking fish in there, and they've got lakes popping up everywhere now, haven't they?
Up north. Disney.
Yeah. That new complex, what they calling it, Disneyland or something, like that. And I'm sure, knowing Danny, that's going to be a fantastic complex.
Yeah. So the linear of the north.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Yeah, I mean, I already know some of the fish that they've already got some fantastic fish in there, to be honest. They dropped lucky with a couple of lakes that were like the stock was sort of like going to be sold, because I think the lakes owners changed hands or whatever. So they've already got some fantastic stock in there, to be honest. It's going to be a good old place, I think.
Brilliant. And what's the waiting list on there? Do you know?
I don't think it's going to be day ticket, I think.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's just going to be day. It's just going to be a day ticket. Yeah.
Right.
I think they got 6 or 7 lakes up there.
Yeah.
I think they're going to open 3 or 4 to start with.
Right.
But obviously, when most of the lakes are big, and I think when you're stuck in lakes like that, to a day ticket standard where you need a lot of fish in them for people to catch. When people fish day tickets, they expect there to be a lot of fish, don't they?
Yeah.
So I think so it's probably going to cost them an absolute fortune to get it stocked to the level that they'd like it. So I guess that's why they're only going to open 2 or 3.
It's funny how it's changed, isn't it? How you can sort of buy some gear, rock up, and be with the chance of a 30 and a 40.
Yeah.
Almost sort of anyway. Spend a bit of time on YouTube.
I mean, there's so many big fish around. I mean, look at linear. There's 40-pounders in every lake.
Yeah. Crazy,
the amount of big fish around now is just phenomenal. If you want to go down that route, yeah.
Yeah. What about your time on Christchurch? Obviously, hell of a water back
Yeah.
into the grey water now. You had
Yeah.
fish named after you.
I know, yeah. That was actually Martin Pick. I'm
Right.
sure you know Martin.
Yeah,
I'm sure everybody will know Martin Pick.
Yeah.
And we were fishing. I was down there on I think I was down on a 4-nighter, and Martin was next to me.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was fishing really well, and I caught a few, and I think I'd had about 3 or 4 bites that night, and it all kicked off about 4 in the morning, and I caught a mid-20 sort of common, I think it was, something like that.
Yeah.
And I thought, shall I keep that? Well, back then a mid-20 was a lot, so anyway, I put it in a sack. We were sacking no retainers back then, so we were sacking fish. So I put it in a sack. I thought, well, it's going to be light in a couple of hours. So I put that one in a sack. Anyway, I was putting that in a sack, and no sooner had that, I was literally putting it in, and one of my other rods had gone. Anyway, landed this fish. I thought, that's a cracker, £35 something, I think it was. So anyway, I put that in my second sack. Anyway, I was just sorting that out, and it was, not far off getting light then. And then my third rod went off, and it was a 24 common. I thought, well, I'll keep that as well. I had no sacks left, so I just put it in the net.
Yeah.
So I put the rods back out. I'll just sit there for half an hour watching these fish, because it was quite warm. I thought, well, just got to keep an eye on. That's a big fish, that is. So it's a massive fish for back then. And I thought, well, anyway, I fell asleep, and anyway, the next thing I know, it was about 6 o'clock, sort of about an hour later, and anyway, the 24 common had managed to get out the net, so that one had gone. So I only had 2 to photograph, and anyway, Picky was next door. I said, oh, fancy coming and photographing this fish? And I said, it's a cracking fish, big scaly thing, £35 odd, and it was a cracker. A couple of the other local lads were on there as well, and they said, what, you call that out of here? And I said, yeah. And they looked at each other, we've never seen it before. So I'm sure it must have been caught at some stage, but just nobody sort of knew it. It was sort of almost like an unknown fish. Yeah, I guess it's probably just pushed through quick. It was probably at mid-20, maybe 18 months ago, and it's just one of them fish that's and a mid-20 probably that nobody had named, or it was just one of the many, and it's pushed through to 35, which in actual fact was the third biggest fish, because you had the petals, then you had the orange fish, which was around about 36, and then that one. Because all the other commons, and you had, I think the biggest common at the time was a box common, which was around 32, 33, and the perch common, which was around 32, 33.
Yeah.
They were the biggest 5 fish in the lake. So he said, this is unknown, and they were all, let's get some pictures of it and that, and and it just in the never had no more about it, and then all of a sudden I saw it, years and years after I had come off Christchurch, and all of a sudden I saw it turn up at like £45, and they were calling it Poole. I thought, no, I didn't even know nothing about it, but it was Martin Pick who sort of named it. And then there's another one in there now. I think Poole is dead in it, and and they call one baby Poole now, which. But it was a fantastic stock back then. Even then, sort of when I went on there 2001, I was fishing Horseshoe at the time, and I sort of heard a bit of a whisper. A few of the Horseshoe lads were starting to go somewhere in Oxford. I didn't know where. A guy called Mike Winston, actually, who was one of the original sort of Horseshoe guys. Yeah. He'd been going over there, and he'd been having some nice fish on the zigs, because obviously it was really associated with the zig fishing then. And anyway, I did a few. I'd found out the name of it as Lynch Hill, and at the same time, another friend of mine, Mark, who I've been doing a bit of fishing with. Again, after sort of hadn't fished with him since I went to school. Went to school with him, and he said, I've been fishing Lynch Hill. I'm on the Lynch Hill Syndicate, and it was for all 3 lakes, so Willow, Stoneacres, and Christchurch. Well, Christchurch was day ticket then, but then there was like a 65-man syndicate on Willow at the time. This would have been in 1999.
Right.
And he said, it's £265 for all 3 lakes, and that included Stoneacres and Christchurch, and then the syndicate lake was Willow. And he said, I'll see if I could get you a ticket if you're interested. Anyway, I went up there and met the owner, Derek. I think he still sort of runs it now, from America or whatever. Yeah. And we sort of got on, and he sort of gave me a ticket on there. So in 2000, from March the 15th, 2000, I thought, well, I'll have a go on Willow first. So fish Willow for 12 months. But in the meantime, I used to sneak over to Christchurch and actually caught a couple at Christchurch Stalking. And one of them actually came out big the other day. I saw it. I think they call it single scale. Right, yeah, that was my first fish out of there. Yeah. £27. I stalked it just out the edge in what then was the first swim. Before the road. Obviously the road's gone now, as we were talking about earlier, the swims like the new dig, and that was that area, that was actually a separate lake back then, and then there was a road cutting across, which used to have a conveyor belt, and they used to send big trucks over it all the time. Obviously that's all dug out now and it's one lake. Yeah. But then I knew about this fish. You know, there was this fish they were talking about in Christchurch. You know, all of a sudden it was 38, then it was 39, then 41. And I thought, well, following year, I thought I did pretty well on Willow. There was some cracking fish in Willow even then.
Yeah.
I thought, right, I'll go and have a go over there. But I didn't realise how busy it was going to be. I can remember the first time turning up to fish Christchurch. I think it was about the early May, and I couldn't get a swim. So I had to go back on Willow. And it was like that. You know, you'd almost, you know, you'd wait for 1 or 2 swims to sort of come free. That's how busy it was. And but obviously, but in the meantime, you know, everybody had started to hear about this fish called Petals, which was obviously like 10 pound bigger than anything else now, and it was absolutely flying. And and so eventually I started getting over there and started doing a few sessions, and I think I actually caught it on my 3rd session. But then again, I went over there. I think there was 2 swims free, and I actually set up in the first one because there was nowhere else to go, and I caught a 30 pounder within a couple of hours. I think it was a fish they called the Black Mirror now. I'm not sure whether it's still in there now.
Okay.
But it was a fish known as the Black Mirror. I think that got to well over 40 pound. I think it might have gone now.
Yeah.
Within a couple of hours, the swim had sort of cleaned out.
Yeah.
And a couple of anglers had gone on the very bottom bank, and the wind was hacking in there. So we went round there, and it was really weedy that year in the margins, and I was sort of stood in the very bottom corner, and I just saw these fish just tracking through the margins in like a little gap in the weed. I'm thinking, oh, there's a good chance here. So anyway, I went and got all my gear, and sort of thought, let's have another look, you know, plot it out before you chuck in, you know, go and get all excited and just chuck a couple of rods out and ruin it, because I knew that it was like quite a tricky lake even back then.
Yeah. And
anyway, I saw these fish coming down this track. I thought, oh, there's 2 or 3 fish there. Oh, that's only 1 fish. Effing hell, that's big. And obviously it was Petals was coming through, and it was just like a lump of a fish.
Yeah.
It was massive. And I knew that it was big. I didn't realise that it got to as big as it was. And anyway, waited for it to go round. Got a little trap in the edge, I just dropped a little solid bag. It was literally off the rod tip.
Yeah.
And literally, I put the rod right back up the bank, so the line was running through the grass and going down into the lake. So there was no sort of line running through the sort of open water, so to speak. And sort of an hour later, it went off, and it was on the end, 46-14. But it was it was an amazing fish.
Yeah.
Probably the most difficult fish that I've ever held. It was so thick you just couldn't get your hands around it.
Yeah.
You almost had to sort of balance it. But yeah, it was a fantastic fish.
Yeah.
And it was around for a good few years.
Yeah.
I think it probably another 3 or 4 years it was around. It didn't sort of get much bigger, to be honest. I think it probably, to be honest, it probably got caught a few too many times. The old thing, you know.
Yeah.
It used to be quite a friendly fish, you know. Probably come out sort of 10 times a year.
Crikey.
I mean, funny, and I think he was just used to like eating.
Yeah.
And I can remember the day after I caught it. It was up the other end feeding over somebody else's rig. You know, it was less than 24 hours later. It was spotted on the other end of the lake, feeding over somebody else's rig.
Wow. What swim did you have it on from?
Well, it was sort of as you sort of walk on, it was on the very bottom bank, the little narrow bank at the end, right in the very corner.
Yeah.
I don't think it had a name.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the swims had names back then, like the Point and like the was there one called the Life Buoy and stuff, and the Trees and stuff like that. It was right at the very end in the corner, so you literally fished in there. You had next to no water to fish. Right. Like the next swim up the left-hand bank would have been what they called the end trees. Yeah. So you literally had 25, 30 yards of water you could fish to.
I think 11 and 12.
Yeah, it was a real sort of close-in swim. But I went on to catch the orange fish from there as well a couple of sessions later, and that was a cracking fish.
It is a big fish. From what I can gather, it's probably one of the only swims that would be free if you were to go there.
Right.
But it is, from what I can gather, a big fish swim.
Yeah, I mean, I never caught many fish from there.
Yeah.
But when I did catch one, it was always a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I only ever caught 2. And it was, the first one was Petals, and the second one was the orange fish.
Wow.
But I stayed on, did a few sessions on Christchurch all that year. And then the following year I had to go on Stoneacres, which was probably a lot quieter than it is these days. Probably, I think the biggest fish it had done back then was sort of probably around about 42. I think what you get people to admit to, I mean, just give you an idea, back then I think it had done like a 40, but I think that had died. And the biggest sort of known fish in there that what people thought was a fish that later became known as Choco, which back then was I think 37.8, something like that. Right. It was quite funny actually, because we started fishing it, and I'd actually already caught a fish on the floaters there the year before when I was walking back from Christchurch. I'd just been down the shops and I saw a load of fish in the bay, in the cafe bay as they call it.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, if they're still there when I get back, I'm going to come and have a go for them. And anyway, I was lucky, got me rod back in there, and within a couple of hours I'd had a absolute cracking 23, 24 pound sort of heavily scaled mirror off the top. And it was but then it was a great floater water as well. I caught quite a few off the top, and John had a 40 pound common off the top as well. Which I think that common's long gone. I think until recently, I think it was still the late record common.
Right.
I think it's been beaten now.
Yeah.
But they always used to be on the top, and it was a great stalking water as well.
Yeah.
I used to spend. I did do a few nights on there. Probably did about 15, 20 nights through the year on Stone Acres. But I probably did. I was travelling up sort of an hour, sort of travelling south for about an hour to get to there. I probably did 50 or 60 day sessions. I was coming up 2 or 3 days a week to do day sessions on Stone Acres because it was such a great. And I literally used to just drive round and round to the corners and the bays looking for fish to stalk. I mean, it was a great stalk. They were very, very tricky to catch.
Yeah.
But you'd find them in the edge every day, and you could get them feeding.
Yeah.
Catching them, you could get them feeding easily. They hated sweet corn.
Yeah.
They absolutely hated sweet corn. And I later found out that they'd been battered in their early days in there on corn.
Right.
So it was just like I was just baiting with like micro pellet, and that was the key to get them feeding.
Yeah.
And you could get them feeding, you could get them troughing, but then once you got a rig in there, it was just never the same.
Yeah.
They knew, and I could never work out what they were seeing when you got a rig in there, because the type of bottom, I think it lended itself, because it was quite gravelly, so you could, a lead would just disappear into the bottom, like and you could almost, some of the areas I was stalking, you could almost just, sometimes I was walking out and just pressing the lead in, and that's what actually one of the best fish I caught stalking was the fish. I think they call it Kev's Linear.
Yeah.
I mean, I caught that in. I'd actually walked out to the spot and like pressed the rig in and almost buried it and then that's how I caught that one. And I had 2 in a day doing that.
Yeah.
And I sussed out that in the end it must be a rig thing. They were seeing something in the shallow water that was putting them off. But it was a fantastic water. Some fantastic fish, and most of the fish then didn't have any names. Choco wasn't Choco. The bite mark. I think I was lucky to catch that one as well. I think 36. But they had no names or anything. They used to call in fact they used to call it single scale then. That bite mark when I used to fish it, they used to call it single scale.
Right.
So a lot of the fish had different names. And to be fair, there was quite a few more fish in there then than there is now. I think they've gradually got less and less over the years.
Right.
But fantastic water again.
Yeah.
I was really pleased to do a year on that, and we did okay, to be honest. A mixture of like fishing long range with using the boats, but then I caught a lot of fish close in as well.
Yeah.
It was the stalking was brilliant. The floater fishing was good as well. I think these days, I don't think the fish. I was told by another member, the fish sort of like steer clear of all the mixers and stuff like that, and they're difficult to catch out the edge as well. So
that's an interesting point you raise, obviously, about adapting and tweaking things in the margin. Obviously, being able to see them makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Be able to tweak things and adapt and try something else and physically see it. You can learn so much.
That's one thing I like about the floater fishing as well.
Yeah.
I sort of tend to. I think you can, when you get them feeding on the top, I think you can watch them feeding on the top, and I sort of like. I think it helps. Imagine they're feeding like that on the top. They must be feeding in a similar way on the bottom, because, if you spot out a load of. Say you spot out a load of like floating trout pellets in little, a spod and whatever. They're all tight little patches. You get the fish on the top feeding, and they come up and they'll sit in one spot turning and just like gulp, like Pac-Man all in one little area, but in maybe like a foot or 18 inches square. They'll just stay on the spot, stay up, and I can imagine them when you've spotted an area hemp and pellets out on the bottom, they do exactly the same. So you need a short. That's why I always, if you fish like that, you need a short little rig to catch them.
Yeah.
Then if you spread bigger mixers over a wider area, I find that's when although I've done a lot of PVA bag fishing and spodding and fishing real tight on waters, even like Horseshoe, Alsto, etc.
Yeah.
And I fish like that a hell of a lot. When you watch them feeding on the surface, you realise that the best way to catch them is to get a wide spread of bait and get them moving between the baits.
Right.
Because that is definitely the way to catch them on Farias, on the floaters. So what I tend to do is I'll start on the small pellets, get them feeding. The moment they're feeding, then I stop putting out the small ones and start putting out bigger, like say 11mm floating trout pellets, and spread the baits around.
Right.
So to get the fish moving, and when the when you get them on the top and when you get them moving, moving a foot or 18 inches between your floaters, travelling, and then they're picking the hook baits, picking the floaters up on the move,
right.
Without stopping.
Yeah.
That's when they're catchable. That's when
Right.
you will catch them. Trying to catch them, casting a hook bait into a 2 foot square area of small floating trout pellets, or even bigger pellets, to be honest, and trying to get a bite out of that is almost impossible. But get them moving around the swim, get them searching for the bait, and especially if you've got more than one fish, that's when they're catchable on Farias. And I think that I can imagine that the same on a lot of waters on the bottom as well. Even though, say, like I've always fished, I've always been a bit of a spodder, fishing tight over hemp and pellet and that. I think over the years I thought, maybe sometimes I've made it difficult for myself by doing that, rather than putting a more wider spread of bait where you get the fish moving around the swim more.
Yeah.
And I think that's where what sort of wide spread of boilies can actually sort of like,
Yeah.
sort of, if it mimics the surface, and I think it does.
Yeah.
I think it definitely mimics the surface, as it, you can think about the surface fishing as you think about the bottom fishing.
Yeah.
And getting them moving between baits, getting them searching out for the baits, that's when I think they're easier to catch.
And so with, obviously you mentioned about using that slightly shorter rig when you're fishing real tight spots. Will you sort of adapt your rig to your baiting scenario to match, or do you just sort of have a go-to bottom bait rig?
I tend to, I don't use many different rigs, to be honest. I mean, I tend to say I do quite a bit of solid bag fishing, which is a pretty much bog standard sort of starting point, 4-inch braided hook link.
Yeah.
Basic knotless knot with a bit of shrink tube on, just to kick the hook around, kick the eye, make it sort of almost create that sort of bent hook effect. Start off at around about 4 inches, but I mean on Christchurch we used to go down to about 2.
Right.
That was the way back then. That was the way to get them if you fished a long hook link. I mean, even then, back then they were I'm sure they're still the same now, but they were experts at picking up the hook bait.
Yeah.
Sort of lightly hooking themselves, but then staying on the spot and spinning you up.
Yeah, I got done by that, I realised.
They were absolute experts at it back then, and we found the way to get round it was to literally go to a solid bag and a hook link literally 2 inches long, and you think, well, how are you going to land on that? But you did.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, we were landing fish and the lead was almost in the fish's mouth. That's how short we were going. But back then, that was the way that we found that was the way to do it.
Yeah.
And there were some guys who were, I can remember one guy, I won't name him, but he was sort of struggling on the lake, and he was fishing sort of long shank hooks, and he was fishing like grains of fake corn, and he was spodding out hemp and corn and stuff like that. But he was fishing longish rigs, 9-10 inches long. I can remember he was there for 3 days, and every morning he reeled in all 3 of his rigs. Instead of being like 9 inches long, they were all just twisted up, and they came back in an absolute mess. You tell he'd had pickups on every rod every night, and he'd been done on every rod every night, and he was almost in tears. He just could not get a bite, and all he'd get were maybe 1 or 2 bleeps in the night.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were getting the same, even on sometimes on like a solid bag with a sort of like a 4 to 5 inch hook link. They were doing you know that you could tell you reel it in, and they must just sit on the spot and sort of like start rotating, because there was no nuisance fishing there.
Yeah.
So there was no bream or tench or roach that could be picking you up and doing that. All there was carp. So you knew it was carp. They were picking you up. They were smart enough. They'd learnt not to run off.
Yeah.
And it was almost as if they were sat on their head and just spinning and spinning and spinning until that it like teased the hook out. Sometimes they get away with it. Sometimes they wouldn't. I guess eventually, if they couldn't get, they'd like eventually they panic, and that would when you get a take, But yeah, that was sort of opened my eyes on Christchurch to how riggy fish could be.
Yeah.
In fact, I've never seen a water again like that, like Christchurch was back then. They were certainly sort of one-off fish. They were so riggy. It was, and that was when you think that was 18 years ago. So God knows what they're like now.
Yeah, it's funny. I've gone the other way on there on my last session. I'm fishing. I think they're about 14 inches long, the rigs I was using.
Well, I know it wasn't that many years after I stopped fishing Christchurch that fishing the longer rigs, that was the way to go.
Yeah.
So it went full circle.
Yeah.
And it was the longer rigs and people fishing boilies that were catching the fish.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you weren't hearing anything coming out on the short rig. So it all goes full circle.
It's
they all got caught on the short rigs for a few years. Thought, well, we've had enough of that, and everybody was doing it. It's the same, if everybody's doing the same thing, then if somebody comes on with something new, slightly different,
an edge, then
it might not have worked low originally, but then it can suddenly become a massive edge. That's why you just got, just keep thinking about it all the time.
Yeah, constantly evolve. What have you been back to Horseshoe since the restocking and the fish?
I haven't. No, I thought about it, but no. I mean, I fished it so much back in the day. From '97 to 2004.
Right.
At times I used to spend a lot of time there. So no, I haven't been back. But they seem to be doing a good job. Obviously they lost a lot of fish in 2000. I don't know when it was. 2011, something like that. They lost a good few fish on it. I'm not sure why they did, to be honest. I don't think they even know, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, those fish were getting old, and sometimes you see that on waters that have got a large stock of old fish. Sometimes you get a year when a lot of them die together. I think that may be what was the case on there.
Yeah.
It's just they were all getting to it. But there's still some originals left in there, and there's still a good few.
Yeah, there's one that I saw. I had, it was my PB for a while, actually. I think it was like 35A. It's still in there now. It's probably about £32. It's got like a slight dip in its back.
Yeah, I know the fish.
Quite a long fish.
Yeah, I know the fish. I got a funny story about that fish, actually.
Right.
I can remember I know exactly which fish you mean, and it's still in there, yeah.
Yeah, I saw Josh Boys, I think it was, had it a while ago.
I was floater fishing on the road bank in Summer Bay, and I got one rod out on the bottom, and they started taking the floater, so I thought, right, I've always liked the floater fishing, so, it was a case of, I'm floater fishing, whatever. So anyway, I was just getting them going, and my bottom rod went off. I started playing that, and my controller rod was actually, I just put it out there, so it was on the floor. And there was back then, the office was just an old porter cabin that was just in the main gate, just on the right.
Yeah.
And there was a guy doing something to the electrics, and it was his dinner hour, and he'd see me playing this fish.
Yeah.
And he'd walk around, he said, cool, he said, I haven't been fishing for probably 20-25 years. And as he said that, my floater rod started dragging across the gravel because the fish had picked it up. I said, well, hang on, mate, if you grab that rod, there's a fish on there. He said, you sure? I said, yeah. I said, grab it, mate, because the rod's going to go in. So anyway, he picked up this rod, and I could see straight away that it was a good fish.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he was playing it, and I got my fish that I hooked on the bottom close in. I landed it. It was like a 14-pound fully scaled, typical horseshoe fish. And anyway, even though he hadn't fished, to be fair, he knew what he was doing, and he got it into about 10 yards out. And I thought, well, he said, I tell you what, I'm going to be buying me a load of gear now. I love this. And he was ultra keen.
Yeah.
And anyway, he got it. It rolled on the surface, and I thought, oh shit! I saw what it was, and I hadn't got the heart to take the rod off him, so I had to let him have it. And it was exactly that fish. I think it was 29.12.
Right.
So yeah, back then that would have been in 2001, 2002, and that's a big fish for off the top there.
Yeah,
29.12. Yeah, and it was that fish. I know exactly which fish it was.
Yeah, and then got it. I think it was 2005 or 2006. It was my first time I fished there. It was when I was a bailiff on Daiwa, and I think it was the very first year they let bailiffs fish the close season on there on Horseshoe, and it was down in No Carp Corner, and I've never had a fight like it. It sort of had it just in the margin under a tree on a solid bag, but it just shot off into the middle of the lake into Winter Bay, and the scrap caught.
Yeah, there's still quite a few fish that I see caught that I recognise from back in the day.
Yeah.
Not that many these days, but still the odd one. Yeah, a few of the old bigger mirrors. That one that they call the target, I think they call it the target, the biggest fish, it goes around about 38. I can remember catching that at around about sort of £29.
Yeah,
that's a cracking fish. But I mean, I think they've had loads of new 30s come through this year, so they're doing something right. Yeah,
definitely.
Those new fish that they put in are sort of like putting on weight. Whether I'll go back, I'm not sure, to be honest. But I don't really get that much chance to fish these days. So when I do, say I go over Farias for a day, or say we're lucky enough to sort of get a week here on Rich Wilbur's place on Spitfire. So so I'm never going to give that up.
No, definitely. Right, if we go to a few sort of quick fire questions.
Yeah, sure.
Right, so obviously we've answered the main one where everyone's asked where you've been. We got that out of the way right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right, so someone's asked, what's your most memorable or favourite capture? We've probably got a few. Which one sort of stands out? Or which few?
Last year, obviously, I caught my first. No, sorry, not last year. It would have been 2017. I've been after a 40-pounder off the surface for a long time, and I'd been really close on waters like Dinton, and sort of down on Linear and stuff. But that's one of the reasons I joined Farias. So 40-pound common off the top, which was August before last. And obviously mentioning Dinton would be a fish I put up on my Instagram account quite recently, actually, which was fish known as the dustbin at Dinton Country Park out of White Swan.
Right.
That was another real back in the day. I don't catch many fish these days, so I have to put in all these real old ones. Again, that was 2002, I think it was. So 38, 12 off the top. And that was a massive fish for the surface back in those days. Like, Dinton was an amazing water. I mean, we could talk about Dinton for hours, like the floater fishing and the fishing on Dinton. We used to travel down sort of 200-mile round trip just to do get 12 hours fishing in. But amazing water back then. You had the likes of Bruno, Berners Linear.
Yeah.
So the dustbin off the top out of Dinton, and I guess possibly the long common out of Spitfire, which was a couple of Augusts ago. I mean, very tricky fish to catch. I think it's only ever been caught about 7 or 8 times in its life, and I think it went 9 years without getting caught once, something stupid like that. And it's not been out since I caught it.
Crikey.
So I was lucky to get that one. But there's a few really. And some smaller ones as well, to be honest. Some smaller fish I've caught. It's not necessarily the most memorable ones are always the biggest, like the fish out of Dinton. That was a memorable one. There's 1 or 2 out of Welly as well. Obviously the turtle that morning when I caught that one, I thought all the fish had gone, and I think I'd had 7 or 8 bream in the night on that rod.
Grueling.
There was one back then. There was one shoal of big bream in there. And it was relentless. I put a lot of hemp out actually. I think all the hemp I had. I just thought, I'm going to put all this in. It was about 4 or 5 kilos. And obviously the shoal of decent sized bream in there. They decided to move in. I think I had 7 or 8 double figure bream in the night.
Crikey.
Which people knew they were in there, but it was literally just a small shoal of them. And so the turtle out of Wellington. But there's a few really.
Nice.
But not sort of one in particular. There's probably just probably 4 or 5 sort of that stand out.
You've had so many, haven't you? So, right, another question. So big question, but how would you go about trying new baits that you're less confident in?
I'm not one. I tend to once I get on a good bait, I tend to stick to it. But you've got to use them somewhere. So I probably just sort of never sort of go in with something new on where it really mattered. I'd probably go off, try it on a sort of easier water, get a few bites, get a bit of confidence, and then just see. Sometimes I always find with baits, you can almost, I've been fishing for a long time now. I can almost sense when a bait's going to catch me fish. You almost sort of know. But of course, when I first started, I used to be terrible. When I first started fishing, I used to be terrible. I can remember going over to Waveney Valley D Lake. I mean, which obviously then, it was a tricky lake, and I was sort of green. And I think for a week, I think I took 20 kilos of boilers, and I think there was probably 10 different I had 2 kilos of 10 different boilers to take over there. But you do that when you don't know any different. I mean, we get loads of guys coming in the shop or going out for a weekend. They'll buy 4 kilos of bait. They'll have 4 different ones. I wouldn't dream of doing that now, but of course when if you haven't been fishing long or you don't know, you want to try different things, don't you?
And you think that just and it's all about that magic bait where everyone know you can put most.
Sometimes it can be worth doing that, if you don't try different things, you never get to sort of suss out what is what stuff gives you get the most confidence in. So it's I think everybody you can't tell me anybody would when they sort of first started carp fishing, they didn't I'll have a pot of that, a bag of that, a pot of this, and try loads of different stuff. I always used to do it, and then you gradually fine it down and
before you've got 50 pop-up pots.
I mean, the amount of pop-ups and that I've thrown away over the years. When I used to buy loads and stuff, and most of you use 1 or 2 out of each tub, and then in the end, 2 or 3 years you open up the tub and they thought, they don't smell like they used to, so you just lob them away. So everybody goes through it. So it's just a case of trial and error, just trying it on an easier water to start with, getting a bit of confidence in something, and then just eventually you've got to bite the bullet and give it a go on your your target water or whatever, and you just got to try it.
But that's the thing. It's all about that confidence, isn't it? You don't want to be fishing a rock hard water and umming and ahhing or wondering about your bait.
You want to you want to have tried it somewhere before, caught a few fish on it to know get a little bit of confidence in it. Eventually you've got to take it somewhere and try it. You've got to but get a bit of confidence in it first before you sort of go out and sort of go on like your big week of the year, or
Yeah.
you know, something like, go and try it first on a runs water,
Yeah.
go into linear or something like that, get a few bites on it,
Yeah.
and get a few fish under your belt before you take it somewhere, say
Yeah.
like Christchurch or something like that, or
Yeah.
or somewhere like, you know, that's really tricky.
Yeah, really good advice that. Okay, another question. So the best and worst things that have changed in the last decade in fishing?
Best, I mean, obviously, the worst I would say is obviously got to be, you can't go any other the route other than predation, and you know, it's creating like havoc in some areas and cause so many problems on so many lakes. That's got to be the worst thing by a country mile.
Yeah.
A lot of people would say that the lakes are busier and that, but you know, you can live with all that. It's definitely the predation. It is a real problem, I think. Real problem that, you know.
Everything with rivers, I suppose,
Yeah.
as well, is just going to escalate, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Best thing. I'm not sure. The fish are getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, the fish are just getting bigger and bigger. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
there's more open access.
everybody's, everybody's got a chance to go and fish for. You know, I'm not tend to be too elite about it. You know, if you want to go and fish a big fish, you know, just go and fish for them. Like, go and fish for what you want. I mean, you know, you get some people think, well, he's only been fishing 5 minutes, he's caught a 40-pounder and all this goes. Well, so what? You know, you've got to just go and fish for what you want to fish for. As long as they're, I'm not over keen. To be honest, there's a few waters around the country I wouldn't go and fish. I'm a bit funny in regards to sort of origins. If they've been, if a load of big 20s and 30s have been shoveled in a lake and they're opening up a couple of weeks later, that's not for me.
Yeah.
I prefer fish with a bit of history. Like your Lynchill and that.
Yeah.
I mean, even some of the, let's be honest, some of the heritage and history waters that we all fish now, they've got a bit of a checkered past in regards to fish movement and that.
Yeah, I suppose they all have, haven't
But
they? Really,
sometimes people forget about that. Even waters I've just mentioned. A lot of waters where fish, not necessarily the stocking's been sort of, sometimes done in the dead of night or whatever, or something like that. But that's so you can't be too sort of elite over it. But waters where big fish are chucked in huge numbers, and then literally are opened up a couple of weeks later, and the owners are less than sort of honest to where they've come from. Oh yeah, they've been in here for years. You're seeing that more and more.
Yeah.
So big fish stocked. Instant big fish water's not my cup of tea, to be honest. I won't tend to. I think stocking wise, I think there's so many good quality fish, like up to about sort of 12 to 15 pound stocking fish, that sort of size. Within a few years they're all going to be 20 pounders. So I think there's a limit for me of like once waters are starting to stock fish sort of like really big, and especially if it's obvious that they're they're not come from a decent source. And you can, once you've been fishing for a while, you can pretty much tell.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people though, they can't though. That's the thing. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't knock people going to fish, because if you've only been fishing for years and a local water knocks up like 2 miles down the road and it's got like, I don't know, 3 or 4 40s in or something. They probably don't. They don't realise where they've come from. So it's difficult to criticise people too much. But for me, it's got to have a bit of history about it.
Yeah, and it's nice to obviously watch them grow on, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Yeah.
And the stories that come with it, like you say, the one with Poole's and everything, they all have their own little.
Yeah, and there's loads of waters, like just dozens of waters like over the country, and then like the waters where the fish get names and get a bit of character and stories about them. So but
Cool.
each to their own at the end of the day, I guess. But
yeah, no, absolutely. Right, that's all the questions done. So if people want to catch up with you, obviously they can come into Bankside Tackle. Where else? Are you on social media?
Yeah, you probably won't find me on Facebook, to be fair. I'm not really a huge sort of social media person, but I've got an Instagram account. You can find me on there.
Right, cool. Okay. I'll stick you. Well, I'll tag it when I pop this up live. I'll tag you in the post so people can.
I stick up the odd picture. Like I say, most of the fish oldie ones, because I don't catch much these days, so I have to put something up.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
But or in the shop. I'm here most of the week, especially on like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm always in the shop. Somebody wants to make contact on there or something like, or on Instagram. Say on Facebook. I don't really get on there that much. I have got an account, but I don't really use it that much. You'll probably struggle to sort of find me on there, to be honest.
Cool, brilliant. All right, well, we'll wrap up. We're nearly at an hour. Ian, Paul, thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries, mate.